I still remember that night as if it happened yesterday, the night my entire life split in two. I was supposed to be on call at the hospital until dawn. As a cardiologist in Boston, my schedule had consumed most of my life for years. That evening, however, a colleague offered to cover for me, and I jumped at the chance. For once, I could surprise my husband, Thomas, with something simple and thoughtful. I stopped by a small wine shop near our apartment and picked up a bottle of Cabernet, his favorite. Then I grabbed a box of dark chocolates from the little patisserie down the block. My heels clicked softly on the pavement as I hurried home, excited like a young woman about to see her high school sweetheart. I slipped off my shoes in the elevator so he wouldn't hear me coming, rehearsing how I'd drape my arms around him and say, "I'm yours for the night, no surgeries, no pager, no interruptions." I unlocked our front door, quietly stepped inside, and smiled to myself when I noticed his car keys on the table. Then I froze. A laugh, soft, feminine, intimate, echoed from our bedroom. It was followed by his voice, lower, almost a growl. "You're incredible, Diana." My stomach clenched. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. For a second, I thought I was imagining things, that it was the television, but then came the unmistakable sound of bed sheets rustling and a sharp sigh that didn't belong to me. I gripped the wine bag tighter, my hands trembling so badly the bottle clinked against the box of chocolates. I wanted to turn around and leave quietly, disappear into the hallway like I had never come home at all, but my body wouldn't obey. My feet felt cemented to the hardwood floor. There were shoes in the hallway that weren't mine. Bright red stilettos, scuffed from city streets, tossed carelessly near the closet. The scent of perfume hit me. Heavy, musky, aggressive, the kind I would never wear. My heart pounded against my ribs as I stared at the half-open bedroom door and the moving shadows behind it. "I thought your wife would be home," the woman murmured. "She's on call till morning, saving hearts somewhere," Thomas replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. I slammed the door behind me. The sound ricocheted through the apartment, ending their little fantasy. There was frantic movement, whispers, and then Thomas stumbled into the hallway, buttoning his shirt. He had the nerve to look startled, even guilty, but it lasted only a second before he put on that familiar mask of confidence. "This isn't what it looks like, Julia." My voice came out strange, metallic, like it belonged to someone else. "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like what I think it is." The woman emerged from our bedroom, tall, blonde, stunning in an icy sort of way, wearing my silk robe, the one Thomas had given me last year for my birthday. She gave me a small, deliberate smile. "Diana," she said casually, as if we were meeting over coffee. "Didn't expect to meet you like this. Life's full of surprises." "You're wearing my robe," I whispered. "Oh, I didn't know." Thomas offered it. "But if it bothers you." She slid her fingers to the belt, as if to take it off right there in the hallway. "Enough, Diana." Thomas snapped, finally sounding rattled. "Julia, let's talk about this. It's just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? You were sleeping with her in our bed, Thomas." "Don't be vulgar. You're a doctor. You're supposed to be classy." Something inside me cracked. I hurled the wine and chocolate against the wall, the bottle shattering and staining the white paint red like a wound. Diana flinched. Thomas stepped back. "You're pathetic," he muttered, then raised his voice. "You think you can just walk out and take Ryan with you? He's staying with me." I glared at him. "Ryan was never your son, Thomas. Not in your heart." And that was it. I walked out, barefoot, tears streaking my cheeks, with a single thought pounding in my head. I need to get my boy and get out of this toxic house forever. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed at my friend Vicky's apartment, my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea that had long gone bitter. Ryan was curled up on the couch, clutching his stuffed fox like it was the only safe thing in the world. I watched his small chest rise and fall and thought, this is it. We're done with Boston. We're done with Thomas. We're done with the life that treated us like guests in our own home. In the morning, I called a lawyer. The divorce would take time and Thomas would fight. It was in his nature to fight for the wrong things. But there was something he couldn't stop, my right to leave. "Where will you go?" Vicky asked softly as she poured me a second cup. "Anywhere that isn't here," I said, surprising even myself with the conviction in my voice. "I want quiet. I want space for Ryan to breathe. And I need to heal before I drown in this city." That afternoon, while Ryan napped, I opened my laptop and searched for houses. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but my heart pulled me toward Vermont, a state I had only visited once on a weekend trip years ago, but it had stayed in my memory like a painting. Mountains brushed with green, winding rivers, towns that felt like they'd been frozen in time. One listing caught my eye: an old farmhouse on the edge of a small town in the Green Mountains. 2 stories, wraparound porch, apple trees in the yard. The price was suspiciously low, but something about it made my fingers hesitate over the trackpad. This could be it, our new start. When I called, a warm but slightly shaky voice answered. "Walter Finch speaking." He was the owner of the house. He explained, almost apologetically, that he was an old man living alone, and he had been diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. He wanted to sell the house but remain there until the end. His voice cracked when he said it. "It's the only home I have left." "I understand," I said quietly. And I did. 2 days later, Ryan and I packed everything we could fit into my old SUV. He sat in the back seat with his fox and a notebook he'd started drawing in. "Are we going on vacation, Mom?" "No," I smiled at him in the rearview mirror. "We're going somewhere better. Somewhere we can call home." The drive was long, but something inside me loosened with every mile we put between US and Boston. The skyline shrank, then disappeared, replaced by rolling hills and fields dotted with barns. Ryan stared out the window, wide-eyed, like he was watching the world change colors. "Look, Mom, a covered bridge," he exclaimed as we crossed into Vermont. "It looks like something out of a storybook." "Maybe it is a storybook," I whispered to myself, hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling the weight of our old life finally slipping away. We arrived in the late afternoon. The farmhouse stood just as the pictures had shown, old but dignified, with white paint weathered by time and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Walter Finch waited for us on the porch. He was tall but slightly stooped, his white hair combed neatly, his clothes simple but clean. There was something about his posture, proud despite his illness, that made me pause. "You must be Dr. Summers," he said, extending a hand with surprising strength. "And this must be young Ryan. Welcome to Finch House." Ryan smiled shyly and held my leg, whispering, "He looks like Grandpa from my book." I smiled back at Walter. "Thank you for having us." And in that moment, I knew we might have just stepped into the place where everything would change. The house creaked like it was breathing, each sound carrying decades of memories that didn't belong to me yet. When Walter pushed open the door, a wave of scent washed over us: aged wood, dried herbs, and something faintly sweet, like apples baked long ago. Ryan stepped inside cautiously, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor. "Wow," he whispered, tilting his head back at the soaring ceiling beams. "It's like a museum, Mom." Walter chuckled softly. "Well, it's not quite a museum, but it's been in my family since 1889. My great-grandfather built it. Every scratch and every nail has a story." I followed him through the rooms. The living room was lined with built-in shelves overflowing with books. Not just ordinary books, leather-bound volumes with golden titles that gleamed in the afternoon light. One corner held a large, antique globe, its surface worn and smooth from use. In the kitchen, a cast-iron stove sat proudly like a relic, and the smell of wood polish lingered. Upstairs, Walter showed me a small room with a view of the orchard behind the house. "This can be Ryan's," he said. My son clutched the windowsill, peering out at rows of apple trees bending under the late autumn chill. "I love it," Ryan said simply, which surprised me. He wasn't one to warm up to new places easily, but something about this house, or maybe Walter himself, seemed to settle his nerves. After the tour, Walter led us to the porch, where a pair of wooden chairs rocked gently in the breeze. He took a seat, his movements deliberate but graceful despite his age. "I'll be honest with you, Dr. Summers, Julia," he corrected himself with a smile. "When I put this place up for sale, I didn't expect someone like you to show up. I figured some developer would turn it into rental cabins or worse, bulldoze it for a gas station. But you're here with a kid and eyes that look like you're carrying too much weight for one lifetime." I lowered myself into the chair next to him. I needed a change. Boston, it became too loud, too painful. He nodded as if he understood perfectly, even though I hadn't told him a single detail. "Pain has a way of clinging to cities," he said. "Out here, it's quieter. Gives your heart space to heal." Ryan had already wandered down to the orchard, his little fox animal stuffed in one pocket as he inspected each tree like a tiny botanist. Walter leaned closer. "He'll like it here. Kids need space to breathe, to run, to just be kids." For the first time in weeks, I felt something in my chest unclench. "Thank you for letting us stay here, Walter. I know it's unusual, buying a home but letting you stay in it. But I don't mind. Honestly, I think we need each other." Walter's eyes softened. "We do," he said quietly. "I don't have anyone left. My son died 10 years ago. My wife long before that. And the doctors say my time is short. But don't you worry, I'm not the type to go kicking and screaming. I just didn't want this house to die with me." His words hung in the air. I wanted to tell him I was a cardiologist and that I could handle serious illnesses. But I didn't. Instead, I simply placed my hand gently on the arm of his chair. "Then let's keep it alive together," I said. He smiled, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the man he must have been decades ago, strong, proud, and deeply rooted. That evening, I cooked dinner in my new kitchen while Ryan explored every corner of the yard. Walter sat at the table, reading aloud a passage from one of his old books about Vermont's history. His voice filled the room with warmth, and I realized I hadn't felt this kind of peace in years, maybe ever. The first morning in that house, I woke to silence, a silence so complete it almost startled me. No horns, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just the distant chirping of birds and the low creak of the old farmhouse settling with the sun. Ryan was already outside, crouched in the orchard, studying something with his usual curiosity. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee and saw Walter standing nearby, his hands in the pockets of his wool vest, looking at my son with a faint smile. "He's a curious one," Walter said. "That's good. Curiosity keeps the soul young." Ryan noticed us and waved, holding up an apple so red it looked painted. "Mom, can I eat it?" Walter chuckled. "Go ahead, son. Just wipe it on your sleeve first." Old farmer's trick. That was how our new life began. Slow mornings, simple joys. I started working at the town's small medical center, a single-story building with fewer resources than Boston, but filled with people who genuinely cared about their patients. The nurses welcomed me with polite curiosity, and by the end of the first week, I'd already been invited to a Friday night potluck. Ryan adjusted faster than I expected. The local school was small, just 2 classrooms for elementary grades, but he came home with muddy shoes and stories about his new friends, including a boy named Liam who lived on a farm nearby. For a child who had once been shy and withdrawn, he was blooming. Even Walter seemed to be changing. In the evenings, he'd sit by the fireplace and read to Ryan from his collection of old books, tales of explorers and scientists, men and women who had shaped the world with courage and vision. Ryan would sit cross-legged on the rug, soaking up every word while I watched from the kitchen, feeling something warm in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Safety. One Saturday, Walter invited us to help with his vegetable garden. "Just because I'm old doesn't mean I can't grow a decent tomato," he joked, handing Ryan a small spade. "But I could use some young energy out here." I had never gardened before. My life in Boston was all steel, glass, and deadlines, but there I was kneeling in the dirt, planting rows of beans under Walter's careful instructions. The earth smelled rich and alive. Ryan's laughter floated through the warm air, and Walter's voice, though occasionally interrupted by a cough, held a quiet strength. That evening, we sat on the porch, our hands still stained with soil, sipping lemonade while Walter told us stories of the town. He spoke of harvest festivals, of neighbors who would drop everything to help each other, of winters that brought people closer instead of driving them apart. Community, he said softly, that's what keeps us human. You lose that, you lose everything. His words hit me in a way I didn't expect. Boston had given me prestige, a career I was proud of, but I had been lonely there, even before Thomas's betrayal. I realized I had never truly felt like I belonged anywhere until now. When Ryan finally fell asleep that night, exhausted from digging and laughing, I found myself lingering in the kitchen, watching Walter as he polished one of his old pocket watches. He glanced up, smiling faintly. "You look lighter, Julia," he said. "Whatever you were carrying, it's starting to slip off your shoulders." I hesitated, then nodded. Maybe this place really is healing us. Walter looked out toward the orchard, where the last light of day was fading. This house has seen its share of pain and joy. It has a way of giving people what they need. For the first time in years, I believed him. It started with a sound, a low, wheezing cough from the next room while I was reviewing patient charts one evening. I had heard Walter cough before. He blamed it on old age and these Vermont winters that get into your bones. But this time it carried a rattle that made me set down my pen. "Walter," I called softly, stepping into the living room. He was sitting in his favorite chair near the fireplace, clutching his chest as if steadying himself. "You okay?" He waved a hand as though brushing away my concern. "Just the usual. Don't fuss over me, Dr. Summers." But I did fuss. It's impossible not to when you've spent your life saving hearts and lungs. I sat down across from him. "You said before you had late-stage lung cancer. May I see your medical records? I know it's personal, but if I'm living here with Ryan, I need to understand what we're dealing with." Walter hesitated, then gave a small nod. "They're in the roll-top desk." Diagnosis was made by Dr. Alan Monroe, head of internal medicine at our local clinic. Good man, well respected. I didn't answer, but my instincts prickled. I'd already met Dr. Monroe, smooth-talking, with that fixed politician smile, and something about him had unsettled me. Still, I flipped through Walter's file. The x-rays were blurred, not the high-resolution scans I was used to, and the notes were oddly vague. No biopsy results, no clear staging, just a bold statement. Probable terminal carcinoma. Did they ever do a tissue sample? I asked. No, he said it wasn't necessary at my age. He told me to settle my affairs, so I put the house up for sale. I sat back, staring at those words. Settle my affairs. That phrase wasn't medicine, it was manipulation. That night, after Walter went to bed, I quietly scanned the documents and sent them to an old colleague in Boston, a thoracic specialist I trusted with my own life. I kept it simple. Second opinion needed. Something doesn't feel right. A week passed before I got the call. "Julia, this isn't lung cancer," my colleague said, his tone almost irritated at the original diagnosis. "It's chronic bronchitis with some emphysema changes, common for his age and history. Treatable, manageable. But terminal? Absolutely not." I sat on the porch steps after the call, staring at the orchard where Ryan was chasing fireflies. Relief flooded me, quickly followed by anger. Someone had told Walter he was dying when he wasn't. Someone had made him believe he needed to sell his family home now. 2 days later, my suspicions hardened into certainty. I was leaving the clinic late, and as I passed Dr. Monroe's office, I heard voices. The door was ajar just enough. "She won't last long out here," Monroe said. "Single mother, no roots. She'll sell eventually." A second voice, smooth and unfamiliar, answered, "She'd better. That property is perfect for our resort plans. Keep the old man convinced he's living on borrowed time. We'll take care of the rest." Resort plans, property, a fake terminal diagnosis. I backed away before they could see me, my heart pounding. My brain raced with questions. Who was that man? Why was Monroe involved? And what else were they planning? Later that evening, when Walter came in from the porch, I told him gently, "Walter, you don't have cancer. I sent your records to a specialist, someone I trust. You have chronic bronchitis, nothing more." He stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. "What are you saying, Julia? Zet Monroe lit?" "Yes," I whispered. "He lied to make you believe you were dying, to pressure you to sell your home." Walter sank into his chair, his face pale, eyes wet with confusion and anger. "This house, it's all I have left. Why would someone do that?" "Because this house is valuable to them in ways it's not to you right now. But we're going to fight this, Walter. You're not dying anytime soon, and you're not losing your home to people like that." That night, I tucked Ryan into bed and stood by the window, watching the orchard sway under the moonlight. I thought of Boston, a betrayal in my own marriage, and realized this wasn't just about Walter. It was about people like me, people who'd been told they didn't matter, who'd been tricked into giving up pieces of themselves. And I decided not this time. I thought I had left Thomas behind, left all the bitterness of Boston in my rearview mirror. But betrayal has a way of following you, even when you think you've outrun it. It started with an envelope in the mailbox, no return address, just my name written in Thomas's perfect, cold handwriting. Inside were divorce papers and what he called a generous settlement offer. He wanted to transfer 51% of his company to me as part of the separation. At first, I almost laughed. Thomas generous? Never. Then I felt something darker settle in my stomach. That evening, after Ryan had gone to bed and Walter was reading by the fire, I called an old acquaintance, a corporate attorney named Paul Dobson, who lived 2 towns over. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. I emailed him the documents, and by morning he called me back. "Julia, this isn't generosity," he said flatly. "This is a trap. His company is collapsing. Mountains of debt, lawsuits, unpaid taxes. If you sign this, you'll be the majority owner, legally responsible for everything when it crashes." I stared at the kitchen counter, my knuckles white against the phone. "So, he's trying to ruin me financially?" "He's trying to make you desperate. You'd have to sell anything of value to cover the fallout." There was a pause, "Including your new property." My chest tightened. He knows about the house. He planned this. And then it hit me, Thomas and Dr. Monroe. Different worlds, different motives, but both circling the same thing. Finch House, a historic property with river access and potential development value. For Thomas, it was leverage. For Monroe and his mysterious partner, it was profit. And I was the easy target, an outsider still legally married, distracted by my son and my new life. I called Thomas. He answered on the second ring, voice dripping with faint charm. "Jules, I hoped you'd call. We can make this easy, you know. You sign, you keep the house, and everyone walks away happy." "Your company is bankrupt," I said coldly. "You're trying to dump your debts on me." He laughed, low and cruel. "Come on, Julia. You think you can play small-town doctor forever? Vermont won't save you. That place is a liability, not a home. Take the deal, sell that house, and we'll both move on." My voice shook, but not from fear. "I'm never signing your papers, Thomas. And I'm never selling this house." He chuckled again, the same way he used to when he thought he'd won an argument. "We'll see, Jules. We'll see." After I hung up, Walter looked up from his book, concern etched on his face. "Bad news." I sat beside him, staring into the flames. Worse than I thought. They're all connected, Walter. Monroe, that investor he was talking to, and now Thomas. They want this house. Walter's jaw tightened. "Over my dead body." Then with a bitter laugh, "That's what they were counting on, wasn't it?" "Yes," I whispered, "but they underestimated us." I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I sat by the window, watching the orchard glow faintly under the porch light. Ryan stirred once, mumbling something about a school trip, then went back to sleep, peaceful and safe for now. In that stillness, I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend this house, I would fight back. I had spent my whole life saving hearts. Now I had to save my own life and Walter's too, from people who thrived on tearing others down. By morning, I had called Paul again and asked him to start digging into Monroe's connections. If they want war, I told him, we'll give them one, but we'll fight smart. Walter shuffled into the kitchen, clutching his mug of tea, and gave me a nod. He didn't ask what I'd been doing all night. He didn't need to. The following days blurred into a mix of strategy meetings and quiet determination. Paul, the lawyer, was better than I remembered, calm, efficient, and relentless. He dove into Monroe's financial records, uncovering a trail of bribes and suspicious land deals connected to his so-called resort development partner, a man named Richard Cole. Cole's been trying to buy up farmland all over this county. Paul explained one evening, tapping a thick stack of printed documents on my kitchen table. Your house, Walter's land. It's prime real estate for a luxury retreat. And Monroe? He's their inside man, steering medical diagnoses to push people out when they refuse to sell. Walter shook his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table. All these years, I thought Monroe was a decent man. I trusted him. His voice wavered. He told me I was dying, Julia, and I believed him. I placed my hand gently on his. He won't get away with it, Walter. We're going to make sure of that. The plan was simple but risky. Expose Monroe's false diagnosis and connect it directly to Cole's development scheme. I gathered statements from other patients, all elderly who had been told to settle their affairs for vague, terminal illnesses. Paul arranged for an independent medical review of Walter's case, and the results were conclusive. No cancer, no terminal condition. We brought everything to the town council. I expected resistance, maybe even dismissal. It's easy to ignore outsiders, but I underestimated the community. Word had already spread about what Monroe and Cole were doing. One by one, people came forward. A farmer who'd been pressured to sell, a widow who'd received a similarly questionable diagnosis, even one of Monroe's own nurses who admitted she'd seen unusual payments coming in from Cole's company. The council voted unanimously to suspend Monroe, pending a full investigation, and local law enforcement launched an inquiry into Cole's business. It all unraveled faster than I imagined. Once one thread was pulled, their whole plan came apart. Thomas, of course, didn't take it well. He called me the same night the story broke in the local paper. "What the hell did you do, Julia?" he barked into the phone. "You've made powerful enemies. Do you think this little town will protect you forever?" I let him rant, then cut him off with a calm, steady voice I barely recognized as my own. "I'm done letting you control me, Thomas. And I'm done being afraid of men who think they can take whatever they want. You can deal with your debts on your own. I'm not your shield anymore." The silence on the other end was sharp, almost satisfying. He hung up without another word. That weekend, something remarkable happened. The townsfolk showed up at Walter's orchard, neighbors I barely knew, bringing ladders and baskets. They spent the day harvesting apples, laughing, and talking about how this town would never again allow outsiders to manipulate them. Ryan ran between the trees, his laughter echoing like bells, while Walter supervised from the porch, tears glimmering in his eyes. "Never thought I'd see the day," Walter murmured, watching his yard full of people who cared. "This house isn't just wood and nails, Julia. It's life, and you brought it back." I smiled at him, feeling that same tightness in my chest, the one that had gripped me since Boston, finally loosen and dissolve. "No, Walter, we brought it back." That evening, after everyone had gone, Walter handed me something small and cold, a brass key heavy with age. "This was my father's. It's for the attic and for you. One day this house will be yours, Julia. You and Ryan have given it life again. Promise me you'll keep it safe." I closed my fingers around the key, overcome by emotion. "I promise." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was finally home and ready for whatever came next. The investigation into Monroe and Cole moved quickly once the council got involved. Within a month, Monroe had surrendered his medical license pending trial, and Cole's resort plans collapsed under the weight of financial fraud charges. My ex-husband Thomas, he quietly withdrew his generous offer and sold off what was left of his company, finally facing the debts he had tried to dump on me. For the first time since leaving Boston, I could breathe without waiting for the next blow to land. But the biggest change wasn't in courtrooms or council meetings. It was inside our own walls. The farmhouse didn't feel like someone else's history anymore. It felt like ours. Ryan decorated his room with sketches of apple trees and taped his first ever perfect spelling test on the fridge. He ran with the other kids from school through fields until the sun dipped behind the mountains, his laughter ringing out like he had been born here. Walter, he changed the most. Free from the shadow of a death sentence, he approached every day differently, like he'd been given a second chance. He started physical therapy, cutting back on cigarettes and following a treatment plan I built for him myself. He even reconnected with his estranged younger sister after 20 years of silence. The night she visited for the first time, Walter cried openly at the table, clutching her hands as if afraid she might disappear. One crisp autumn afternoon, Walter surprised us with an announcement. "We're having a gathering this weekend," he said, eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "Neighbors, friends, anyone who helped save this place. A proper thank you." By Saturday, the orchard was alive with people. Tables were set up under the trees, heavy with homemade pies, cider, and roasted vegetables from local farms. Someone strung lanterns between the branches, glowing softly as evening fell. Ryan chased Liam and the other kids between the trees, their laughter weaving through the music of a fiddle player who'd shown up, just because it felt right. Walter stood on the porch, leaning on his cane, and raised his voice. "This house has stood for over 100 years. I thought its story was ending, but thanks to Julia and Ryan, thanks to all of you, it's just beginning again." Everyone clapped, and my cheeks warmed. I wasn't used to being celebrated. I'd spent most of my life behind hospital doors, where success meant quiet, efficient victories. But this was different. This was family. Later that night, after the last guest left and Ryan finally fell asleep clutching a caramel apple in one sticky hand, Walter and I sat on the porch swing. The orchard glowed under the moon, and the smell of cider lingered in the cool air. "You saved me, Julia," Walter said softly. "Not just my life, my hope." I shook my head. "We saved each other, Walter. You gave me and Ryan something I didn't think we'd ever find again, a home." He smiled and looked out toward the trees. "Promise me you'll keep this place alive. Fill it with people, with laughter. Make sure it never goes quiet again." "I promise," I whispered. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I thought about Boston, about betrayal and brokenness, and realized that leaving hadn't been an ending. It had been the doorway to everything I truly needed. That night, sitting on the porch with the smell of apples and with smoke in the air, I finally understood something I'd told my patients 1,000 times but never lived myself. Sometimes a broken heart isn't the end of your life, it's the start of your healing. And for us, it was the start of everything.